On your Friday episode of Locked On Raptors, it's Toxic Positivity Friday. And in this world of geopolitical strife, there's no better time than now to appreciate local products.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, March the 7th, and I am your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 11 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Blue Sky. You can find the show on Instagram. You can join the Locked On Raptors Discord server as well. Link in the description of the podcast. Free to do. Also free is the daily Locked On Raptors newsletter. QR code on the screen if you want to go subscribe, or you can go to the link in the description of the podcast if you're not watching on YouTube. And it's much appreciated when you do it. It's 100% free. You get me 5 days a week. You get today's guests 4 times a week. You get Michael Shearer every Thursday. You get Josh Lloyd fantasy tips helping you win your league. Do I need to go on? It's 100% free. Please subscribe. It makes me feel very good. Makes everyone feel very good. Thanks in advance. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get about $150 and get $150 in bonus bets. That is, if you win your first $5 bet. And we are off and running here on your Toxic Positivity Friday edition of Locked On Raptors, and we are joined as usual, on a Friday. I guess Friday's been your regular day for the most part this year. We've had lots of toxic positivity with you on Fridays, Katie. It's Katie Heindl from the Locked On family of NBA newsletters and basketball feelings and all over the damn place. Katie, how the hell are you?
I'm doing good, Sean. Yeah, I feel like I've been floating around a little bit in our rotation. Some Wednesdays, some Tuesdays, some Fridays.
I love having you on Fridays, though, Katie. It's nice to have your sunny disposition here on the day where we're trying to be toxically positive about
today.
Stuff. Yeah, don't worry. Coming up later on, we are not going to be super positive because we're going to talk about tank nonsense. It's the only thing anyone can talk about these days, because what the hell else are we supposed to talk about when it's very clearly the thing hanging over the entire team? But off the top, I do want to take a little moment here, Katie, to appreciate one RJ Barrett. He is not going to play tonight. And as the Raptors embark upon the last quarter of their schedule, it kind of feels as though we're at the point where we're no longer going to learn new things, at least about the core players on this team. Certainly we'll learn some stuff about Jacoby Walter and Jamal Shed, et cetera, all within, the understanding that March and April basketball is generally pretty fake, but they're still going to play games. There's still going to be stuff to glean. RJ Barrett feels like maybe the book is out on what he is after this season and sort of the player he's going to enter the offseason as. And I think that's worthy of a little bit of celebration, Katie, because damn it, he's been really good. And I come to this as kind of an RJ Barrett, not skeptic, but someone who just kind of, I liked him. I wanted to root for him. And there were reasons to maybe feel a little bit pessimistic about how he might fit in on a winning team. And I still think some of those questions are there, but I feel a lot better about those questions after this season, where the numbers have just been remarkable. 22 points, 6 boards, nearly 6 assists. He's spent the last month totally leveling himself up on defense. And of course, it's just really fun to root for a homegrown guy who's extremely happy to be a homegrown guy playing in Toronto. Katie, overall impressions of RJ Barrett's season to this point. What have you learned, and how are you feeling about RJ's place within this team, which is by no means certain at the moment, but with every single game that passes, it feels like he's kind of locking up a spot on next year's team and very much in the plans for the future as he goes.
I actually thought he was more certain than, I guess, we could believe, which was that he was included potentially in talks to trade to the Pelicans.
Yeah.
That surprised me. That surprised me because of, how well he's been this season, how much I think the team has been able to count on him in some particularly down stretches. And just generally the commitment he showed last year, and then I think a recommitment this year to the team. So like you, this team is certainly in flux. So it's difficult to get your hopes too pinned on one person, knowing they could be out the door. But that did surprise me. It surprised me that the team, it certainly speaks to his capabilities, right? And how good he is on this trade market or whatever. But I was also why are you going to let this guy go?
Yeah, I mean, I thought when the Ingram stuff was floating out there, the reason I was so staunchly opposed to the Ingram thing before it happened, because I thought it would just have to be RJ, right? Like,
Mhm.
I thought just like the money, I didn't really see a world in which the Pelicans are going to be like, all right, just give us like a pick in a second and then a couple of expiring guys and we're fine. Kelly's not expiring, but, his body might have been. And so, I think he's doing all right down in New Orleans. So let's root for Kelly all day. But yeah, like I think I just didn't see a world in which this trade happened, and the fit concerns and all that stuff, and the sort of overlapping skills. It just felt like RJ for Ingram was going to be the move, and that's why I was pretty against it. And to see them pull off the deal without including RJ, I think is great. I think that like optimizes the talent, and RJ Barrett like has talent. There's no doubt about it. And the way he's played this season, look, he hasn't carried over the ridiculous, ludicrous efficiency he had at the back part of last season where everything was going in. He was shooting like 60% on twos. He couldn't miss a damn thing at the rim. The threes were falling in at like a 39% clip. Like, he hasn't done that, but he also has found like a bit of a middle ground between the player he was in New York and the player he was at the end of last year. And I think he's closer right now to the player he was at the end of last year than the player he was in New York overall. What have you been maybe surprised by in terms of the things he's gotten better at this season, Katie? I think he's improved kind of marginally in a few areas here and there, but what's kind of popped out to you?
I think his confidence overall, he really struck me when he first arrived as like a little bit reticent
Mm-hmm.
to, I don't know, not even just be a primary ball handler, but to really just be in the offensive mix. He was kind
Mm-hmm.
of, I think that really spoke to him waiting for cues, on that Knicks team and basically sponging up minutes where he could. And that was not going to be the ask of him, in Toronto. So I think sometimes that can be a more gradual change and take a little bit for athletes to acclimatize to. But generally, how ready he was for that. And I think then the confidence that naturally has followed this season.
Mm-hmm.
I think just in terms of his also reliability, I talked about this, I mentioned it earlier, but just his reliability when the roster had to kind of get shaken up because of injuries. When he was asked to kind of, I don't know, probably like play a little bit of a different role.
He was carrying a huge burden.
Yeah,
Like when Scotty
yeah.
was out in particular, it was crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think his ability to do that pretty consistently and not really look lost, on the floor. And I think with I think now, like what we know from him being in trade talks is that inevitably he probably had that awareness hanging over his head all season.
Mm-hmm.
So that is also like, to me, that adds another element of
Definitely.
growth and maturation to be able to sift through those things and necessarily separate them. So yeah, generally I think just the player he's become, if that's not too corny to say.
No, it's not at all. I think for me, some of the stuff that I think is going to be conducive to him playing on winning teams has been the thing that's really popped for me. In particular, I mean, the playmaking stuff has been awesome. He has
Mhm.
like genuinely taken huge strides. It's like a pick and roll creator, is like a creative passer, not just a guy who within the Raptors offense, which is just, it just hands out assists like they're candy. Like, I don't think he's that much a product of that as much as he is a product of being a guy who just like is a good passer now and like creates looks for others and passes guys open and leverages the attention he draws when he gets to the rim in particular. Like, he's a damn good rim scorer, and that causes defenses to shift their thinking around him. And the passing has come along with it. It's been really impressive. He's like, really, he was for a very long time, he was like a 1-to-1 assist to turnover ratio guy. He's nearly a 2-to-1 guy now. That's massive. That's huge. And I think as Ingram gets incorporated into this team and the overall burden on RJ kind of lessens, assuming he's on the team, which we can get to, I think, all that stuff, it's going to scale down really nicely too, and kind of hit a nice little pocket where he's able to maybe tap back into that north of 60% true shooting. He's at about 56% this year, 57 in games where Scotty Barnes plays. I think, him being with other good players kind of amplifies him a little bit as well, because he is such a dynamic off-ball guy. And the defense too, right? Like, it's come along over the last month. It needs to sustain for longer than a month after a Scotty Barnes call out, but the defense has been genuinely encouraging over this last little stretch as well. 10 deflections in that last game against the Magic earned him the chain. Very cool stuff from RJ Barrett. I want to pick up this thread on the other side, Katie, because I think this might actually spiral into an entire segment. The idea of trading RJ Barrett this summer and sort of the Canadianness of it all, if for lack of a better word or phrase or way to put it, it feels like kind of an uncomfortable thing to do because the dude is playing well in his home country and it's pretty damn cool to behold. We're going to talk about that whole element, the big elephant, I suppose, coming up in just 1 second as we continue our RJ Barrett Appreciation Fest, which is going to go longer than we thought because why the hell not? Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, the single best place to play daily fantasy sports. Basketball season's heating up, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks. Go check them out right now. With Prize Picks, you can just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. That's right. It's easy to use, available in over 30 states, and it lets you mix and match your projections across different sports. It's as simple as it can be. It's just you against your own ability to pick more or less. You're not up against some shadow expert in a basement with an unbeatable lineup. You're not up against 1,000 other lineups that people have put together. It's just you against your own ability to save more or less on certain guys scoring points. Hey, Jacoby Walter's going to be getting a whole lot of run for the Raptors down the stretch here. Maybe you take them more on his points in an upcoming game, say tonight against the Utah Jazz, and add that to your lineup. You can go and do that. Of course, they get fast payouts as well. When you win, your money hits your account in as little as 15 minutes. No waiting around. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDNBA to get 50% off, $50 instantly, that is, after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On NBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Back at it here with Katie Heindl, picking up the thread in our RJ Barrett conversation quickly before we get into some Raptors Jazz preview stuff and homestand look ahead. That stuff everyone's very excited about. The notion of moving RJ Barrett this summer has come up a few times. Obviously, there's the reporting from Jake Fisher, Mike Scotto, and others that RJ Barrett was in the conversations for Brandon Ingram, as you alluded to earlier on as well. The name's been out there. And, it's going to continue to be out there because of the financial realities of the NBA and where the Raptors sit with their books and what they've done by bringing in Brandon Ingram to kind of create this squeeze on themselves. And it's, hey, look, the easy solution here is just pay the tax next year or go into the season paying the tax. And if you need to duck out by the deadline, you duck out by the deadline, and that's fine. I would love for that to be the case. Just pay the tax. You own a damn sports team. Who cares? But we know that's not always how these things work. And so we are going to have to grapple, I think, with the possibility that RJ Barrett gets moved at some point this summer in some sort of roster rebalancing, book rebalancing type of trade. Our favorite kind of trade, the one that makes the books clean. Maybe that's why we watch the sports. Katie, I feel like it's got to be ripping the front office apart inside to consider the notion of trading RJ Barrett, considering, like that's the Canadianness of it all. Like I said before, like he's a dude who's from here, who's like the best player they've ever had from here, who's balling out, playing the best basketball of his life. If you're the front office, how do you weigh that like very real thing that like a gigantic portion of the fan base has latched onto and is like thrilled to be rooting for this guy versus the books? Like I know how I would do it. I feel like I know how you would in theory do it as well, but I'm curious kind of, your sort of view on this little conundrum the Raptors have maybe kind of created for themselves again, which goes away if they just pay the tax. But let's assume that that's not a foregone conclusion.
Well, this is Delano Banton erasure, I have to say. A little bit. Shout out to my guy. Who had to do what many people do and leave Toronto to find success. Unfortunately. Anyway, one, are there tariffs on trades? I'm genuinely asking. I wonder.
I can't imagine that.
Why not?
A human basketball player is considered an import or export.
There's money. There's money involved.
It would be very ghoulish. It makes sense. Like the people who run the world might view human beings this way.
No, I mean, to your point about whether we give weight to what do we want to call it? Just like in
sentimental factors.
Patriotism. sentimental factors, also like global political factors.
That's part of it too.
Yeah, the optics seem bad to trade him at this point,
unless you're
because
getting like Shea or something, great. You just improving upon your Canadian, but that's not happening.
You're not, but then yes, the optics do seem bad. Though I hate to be extremely cutthroat. Like, I'm not for the mind of trading him in the summer, because I'm kind of like, for whom, right? What is the purpose there? If it's a lateral move, then there's no point, really. And if it's a real like aggressive upward trajectory move, I just actually don't see who that would be. So I guess I'll go
Devin
back.
Booker or something like that. Then
man.
No,
I don't think so.
Not Booker.
I don't know I don't know what's going on with the Suns. But Devin Booker is a big part of how bad they are. So I don't think so. Also,
this is a sneaky hot take, Heindl.
I know. I guess this is. And to be fair, like with maybe the reticence, like the shooting reticence, or the way that Brandon Ingram has played basketball in the past few seasons, from what we've seen, alongside Devin Booker, is basically just like two people who love to shoot but like can't make decisions.
Right.
Why I don't. That seems like. I guess that is a hot take. Yeah.
If Booker
seems like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. If Booker KD doesn't work, then Booker and KD Light probably maybe is not like the greatest fit either.
No.
I think their issues are more ownership related than anything else, but that's we don't need to talk about the Phoenix Suns. Back to the nationalism.
Well, I mean, it does kind of fit in, because I think to the decision making point, that's where we've actually seen. I think we've seen shades of that in RJ Barrett's growth, and I do think that is still something the team lacks. Right? You and I have talked about, could that be quickly? I really don't think it's Scotty Barnes, at least not in the way of like one cohesive person. Maybe the Raptors don't have that with the group as they currently have it constructed, but I think in some of the areas RJ has stepped up that we've mentioned, that could also be another one. So patriotism aside, I think just his capabilities as someone who gets the DNA of the team and gets where it's trying to go, I don't think that can be really understated. And yeah, it is. I don't know. You could point out like the hokiness of it, of wanting to have a good homegrown player on your one Canadian outpost team, and how we should be beyond that. But I actually think the opposite is true now, when you have such proof of concept in terms of how many Canadian athletes are in the NBA, and very good Canadian athletes in the NBA. In one case, hopefully the MVP, or certainly in like MVP talks for this season.
Sure.
I think you can come full circle and be like, well, no, we want representation of that too.
100%.
Why not us?
Right? Yeah. I am with you. And I think too, like, I've been a little bit kind of like, okay, get all the Canadians thing. Like, this is kind of lame. But like, I do think, and the point I've made is like, there are enough good Canadian players that you can be discerning about which.
Well, it's not tokenism anymore, right? It's not this kind of like tokenism of
let's
like,
get Corey Joseph just
we
because.
Got a Canadian. No, that's sad for Corey. He
was good. Okay, we love Kem Birch, but like Kem Birch is like the sort of, I think, epitome of this kind of thing, right? Where it's just like, let's just get a Canadian in because he's Canadian.
Is Kem's mom still podcasting? I hope so.
I don't know. Former podcast guest, Kem's mom. Wendy. Yeah. But
shout out Wendy.
Where was I going? No, with RJ, like, he is legitimately good, and so you are being discerning by saying, hey, we want this guy on the team. And look, I understand the fit concerns. Like, I know that's like, and it'd be one thing too if we saw actually RJ Barrett play with Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes and see how the fit works, but I don't think we're going to see that this year. I wrote about it in the newsletter yesterday. Like, with the latest update on Ingram, that we'll get another update in 2 weeks. Like, we're getting pretty close to the end of the runway here, and like, what are you going to do? Bring it back for the 2 weeks of April before the season ends? That feels kind of unrealistic. And so I'm sitting here thinking, like, we're not even going to get to see that fit. And I don't think I'm trading away RJ Barrett before we actually get to see that happen, especially because if you move him at next year's deadline, if things don't work out, you can still duck the tax like you want, right? Like, I think that to me is the play here. And, the sort of all the, the sentimental factors underneath kind of continue to push me even further towards just like, hang on to the guy. He's good. What do you like? You don't need to overthink this one. Just let it, like, maybe you have your reservations about the fit. Maybe the front office has reservations about the fit. We haven't actually seen it yet. And we're pretty bad at predicting things. And so I think we got to see it. I think the way Barrett plays as an off-ball player, a low touch time guy, a guy who's like always super eager to take his wide open threes. It's not like he's passing up threes or bricking them at like a 28% clip. Like he hits 38% of his catch and shoots, and he takes like 5 or 6 of them a game. That's awesome. Like that fits. And I think that's again just another reason in favor of I think keeping him around and having him be part of the mix next year, just to again get a whole look at what all this looks like. It's the most talent they can have in the door, barring an RJ for some sort of big star upgrade type of trade. And so bet on talent, bet on the talent figuring it out, and bet on I think RJ Barrett kind of, you know, in a maybe lesser role, maybe even amping up his effectiveness. And I think the team as a whole itself like has a chance to be one of those greater than the sum of its parts type of teams, which just lots of good, smart basketball players playing together and kind of amplifying one another. Katie, we're going to come back on the other side. We're going to get into, you know, the homestand from hell. The tank derby is very much on, and we're going to talk about RJ and Poeltl sitting tonight against the Jazz, what to expect from the next 4 games against the Jazz, Wizards, and Sixers. Oh boy, buckle up for a win streak that will make everybody mad. We'll get into that coming up in just 1 second. That's the wrong button. Today's show is brought to you by friends over at FanDuel, the #1 sports book in North America. When the NBA tips off, when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off and want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Speaking of fourth quarter comebacks, the Raptors sure like to allow teams to do that by engineering lineups to be conducive to that. So maybe you can go make some scratch if the Raptors are up 10 and put Jakob Poeltl on the bench with 8 minutes left, or Scotty Barnes on the bench for the entire fourth quarter as they lead by 14. You can throw some money down on the Raptors losing that game and get some money out of the deal, I guess. You know, if you're someone who wants the Raptors to lose every game, you can do the reverse happiness hedge and bet against the Raptors, bet on the Raptors to win. So even if they win and disappoint you, the lotto freak out there, you get some money out of the deal. Either way, right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets. If your first $5 bet wins, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your one shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, back at it here on your Friday edition of Locked On Raptors. We're ditching toxic positivity. We've talked plenty about how cool RJ Barrett is, and now we're going to talk about the tank. The Raptors Jazz tonight, a banger at the bank. The Jazz sitting everybody. The Raptors sitting Poeltl and Barrett. They've got Baji and Ingram and Dick out with injury. Jonathan Mobo, I think, is going to be out as well. He busted his nose up. It's going to be a skeleton crew, Katie, for both teams tonight. Really happy I'm going to be in attendance for this one. Can't wait to go to work tonight. It's oh boy, we're into it now. We're into the part of the schedule where there's just going to be chicanery seemingly every single night. And Katie, I really wanted to spring this upon people as a surprise, and you as a surprise, but you kind of already busted out a little hot take Heindl a little bit earlier with your Kevin Durant and Devin Booker takes. But I have to bring you up now because we've been talking about it all week long. Everyone who's been on this show has had a thought or a take on it. I have to ask you, Katie, we need hot take Heindl's view on tanking. Bring in the flames.
Do you do this for anyone else?
No, just you.
Nice. Nice. One, who did the Jazz have to sit?
Larry Markkinen, John Collins.
That was a rhetorical question. Like the whole team they're interchangeable. Sorry, Jazz. Sorry
it's a
to
hot
the Jazz.
Garbage basketball team.
Yeah. Like you could sub in an assistant coach and I wouldn't know, you know? Be like, this is our end of the bench guy. We just called him up from the G League. The tank. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Seen a lot of our colleagues pretty angry this week. Not at the players themselves, at the organization.
Sure.
And I think the differentiation is something I'm still, to me, they're like at one and the same at this point. And I don't think we can believe anybody because if the overarching thought is we can, and I'm not going to get into the math of it all, like the tank math of it all. If the overarching thought is we want to give these guys as much runway as we can, you're lying because you're tanking and you're not really making it into the play-in at this point. I also wonder like the value of a play-in position.
Yeah. They clearly don't want it. They clearly don't think there's much value to it.
And in like these playoffs, I would normally say there's always value in the postseason and a postseason run. I think I have said that before, but
getting smashed by the Cavs in round one, maybe not exactly like a good learning experience.
And for a group that's shown like they have a real hard time turning it on and off, like the team cannot toggle yet. It's why the losses have been so close, right? Like they can't cinch things. So, and what they're really showing in this like very hot and cold, strange section of the season is there's some direction to just coast. The danger in that, I think, is that this is still a really young team. And what is that message like sending, especially to players who like have had a real problem, I think, with commitment and consistency, like Scotty Barnes, right? And maturation, and this idea of like, are you the face of the franchise? Can you shoulder it? Are like, what kind of leader are you? Yeah, he's like called people out this season, but I think when your front office is signaling, production from you and from the team overall is not that important right now because we're just going to go over here and try and roll the dice and, I don't know, potentially get a decent pick to start this all again. Like, how I feel about the draft. Like this year's draft included, still a crapshoot, even if Cooper Flagg is in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
hey, it'd be great if you got Cooper Flagg. You have a very minuscule chance of doing that, even if you're the worst team in the NBA. Like,
yes.
You can't build your entire plans around that.
Yeah. So I think my problem with it overall is it feels a bit of a con from the directive that we got from the front office at the beginning of this season, which was, yes, we're rebuilding, but the expectations are still incredibly high for these guys night after night. That's coming from the top down, right? That is a directive out of Masai's mouth to our ears in day one, like media day conference. And now I just feel like, well, that wasn't true. I get what I've heard in terms of like the front office getting impatient and going out and doing this Ingram deal because they don't want to be bad anymore. You're still just being bad. And you're still operating in a way that feels a bit like subterfuge, as I said before, kind of like a con. There's something about it that just like it doesn't sit right. And I understand like in this stretch of the season, this maybe seems like a silly time to plant a flag and be like, you should be a more truthful franchise with us, because like, what does this stretch really mean for a lot of teams? Like this is either coasting if you're good enough to get to the, because you're going to get to the postseason regardless, or coasting to just make it out of the season. But this is coast time. So I get that. But I also just like, I don't like being told one thing and then seeing another so blatantly.
Yeah, I mean, look, they've also talked about draft position being important to them, so they're not entirely lying there. And I think, like,
who
to
cares?
Your point, no, I agree. Like, look, the tank stuff sucks. I have been a long time anti-tank person on this very show. I think it is loser stuff. I think it is just like, truthfully, the biggest threat to the health of the NBA. We talk about all these things that are wrong with the league. I think the number one thing that's wrong is that for the last third of every season, a third of the league is trying to lose. That's bad. That's anti-entertainment. That's anti-competitive, where the competition is the entertainment in what you're selling. And like a third of your league is just like, we're not so worried about that right now. Like there's something wrong. But that said, like this is the circumstance that the league's incentive structure has created. So I don't entirely blame the Raptors for playing into it, especially to your point, like making this year's playoffs. If they wanted to, there is a very clear path to them winning like 15 or 17 games of their last 20 because of all the teams they play being absolutely wretched. If they really wanted to push for 35 wins in the 10th spot in the Eastern Conference, like that's on the table for them. But to your point, like making the playoffs and getting waxed by the Cavaliers, maybe that's not your sort of, iron sharpening iron, playoffs kind of teaching you the way type of situation that you typically look for. And so I get them being averse to, accidentally falling into the play-in. I get it. I get where they're coming from. I also think it sucks. Like it's a bummer all around that this is just like a thing that fans have to reckon with, that players on these teams have to like get okay with. Cause like, look, to the credit of the Raptors, it seems like the vibes are exceptionally high right now, considering all the weirdness that's going on. Like considering, guys are getting sat in crunch time and they're clearly openly trying to lose games. It seems like everyone's kind of on the same page. That to me seems like a credit to the coaching staff for kind of keeping everyone on the level and sort of understanding of what this is all in greater service of. I think that's all great. Doesn't mean I enjoy that the last 20 games of the season are going to be a farce. It's lame. It sucks. It's like, again, anti-competitive garbage. But I don't see really, like, I think what the Raptors have done here, where they're playing their stars a little bit and then, kind of staking leads for their young guys to go scrap it out in fourth quarters. If they could follow that formula for the rest of the season, I would be over the moon with that, because those are like actual real reps for your Jacoby Walters and Jamal Sheds in close games where everyone on the floor is fighting for jobs, and the same goes for the other team. Like, I think that is like a fine way to handle it. The benching of Barrett and Poeltl tonight suggests that maybe that's not the way they're going to treat things for the rest of the way, and that those 2 wins in Orlando spooked them from going full, trying to find this like tank equilibrium that it feels like they felt for the last 3 games.
You know what it feels like? It just feels like they have decided to press fast forward on this season and like look at what are Brendan Ingram's Toronto Raptors, like what is that team?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, which, like, again, can't totally blame them for that. It's the structure the league has created. It's lame, and I would really like for them to stop thinking about how they can fix the All-Star game and think about how they can address the tanking thing, because it's awful. By the way, the coolest team in the NBA right now, Katie, the Portland Trail Blazers, because they're actually trying to push for the playoffs with a young, cool team. We're pro Blazers.
Delano Banton.
Delano Banton. There you go. Hot Take Heindl has spoken. Bring the Flames back. Woo!
You should. My request for the next time is to make them incrementally bigger.
Okay, yeah.
The hotter the take gets, so to have stages. So like by the time I'm really speaking, I have like a fire ring around my face, so I look like I'm the devil in hell.
Look, you're asking me to do a lot of production work that I frankly don't want to do, Katie. But for
you had that set up.
That
was like, that's beautiful. That was great. Is this Canva? Is this you
audio listeners
flexing your Canva skills?
Yeah, 100%. It's transparent backgrounds. For those listening only on audio, there's a big ring of flames around our heads at the moment to indicate it's Hot Take Heindl time here on the pod. Quick prediction of this homestand they've got: Jazz, Wizards, Sixers. What's their record?
The most painful thing about this is it could either be like, I don't see it being an in between. I see it being like 0 for all or winning all.
Yeah. I'm going to say 3-1. Yeah. Okay. 3-1. I mean, look, they could very easily accidentally go on like a 7-game heater right now while not trying. That's how bad these teams are.
Yes.
Like, and their young guys are absolute tryhards. Like Jamal Shed, the guy's a maniac. The guy's going to try to win every single game he's playing. I don't care. And like Jamal Shed, I think, is probably going to take it to your Isaiah Colliers of the world against the Jazz tonight.
I love Isaiah Collier.
You're going to get to see him for like 47 minutes tonight. So
I know.
That's fun. There's a reason to go to the game. Katie, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. This has been Tank Ethics Week on the podcast. I promise we'll talk about something different next week, but this is kind of the through line of the entire conversation right now. We'll obviously start pivoting towards draft coverage a little bit more heavily and all that good stuff too. March Madness coming up. We'll do a March Madness preview and everything. But Katie, anything you want to promote for the good people out there?
Yeah, today in our Locked On newsletter, I wrote about getting gaslit by the Lakers. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do it. You don't have to believe in them.
Love it.
I stand with Charles Barkley. They've had 2 good weeks of basketball. And when their coach is like, I found the cheat code, it's playing hard every night. that kind of underscores some of your problems. Anyway.
Yeah, I think the cheat code is tricking the Mavericks into ruining their franchise on your behalf.
If your cheat code is effort, it flies in
yeah.
the face of what effort actually is. So it's not a cheat code. And there's no such thing as a cheat code in basketball.
Yeah, this ain't 2K. Everyone go check out Katie's great work in the newsletter. You can find me in the newsletter. You go to the QR code on the screen, link in the description of the podcast. What I'm going to write about today, who knows? I haven't figured it out yet, but I'll do something toxically positive because why not? I might talk about Jamal Shed. I'm very excited to watch him go absolute ham down the stretch. You can also, of course, follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend, join the Discord, link in the description of the podcast. Free to join as always, be part of our listener family. We'll talk to you again on Monday as we break down a couple of bangers against the Jazz and Wizards. Feel the rush, baby. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.